Alright, let's look at a bunch of rook endgames where the defender's king is cut off by few files. First, one of the ones that we cannot win. While the back king is situated close to the center, rooks were placed in front of the pawn, making pushing the pawn forward impossible. Here, for instance, let's demonstrate the problem is that if you try to get with the king, you have to keep the pawn always protected. So black keeps checking you. And here is the problem. After this, you have to go back to keep the pawn. And black just keeps you checked and checked until you hide here. And then it's done. Black has to go back here again to keep the pawn from advancing. If white here waits, black's best move is to keep the king between these two squares. Basic idea is to always be able to attack this rook if it comes here. Here, for instance, it would be a big mistake to do a waiting move with the rook because you get too close to the enemy king. And now the run works. Now you don't have the check here anymore, attacking the pawn and forcing us backwards. Now white makes progress with the pawn and wins. So, but for lucky for black, they have this few waiting moves always here. So if white plays in the beginning, the idea to win is to protect the pawn and now threaten to do the king run. While the pawn is protected, black just kicks our rook away. If you go this way, then we just, well, can go either way. You know, well, black king, when it gets under the pawn, usually draws this easily. We'd probably end up in some kind of a Philidor, or even with the knight's pawn's case. All the passive defenses even work, where you just stick the king all the way here and keep the rook on the back rank. But Philidor is a possibility too. Or if you go here again, the king just runs under the pawn. Probably the easiest. You might get checked here, but the rook can, for instance, run anywhere. And yeah, this is drawing, but you also can do the passive defense and just shuffle the rook on the back rank. And there's no way for white to make any progress here. If you had the bishop pawn, you would check here and win the rook versus the passive defense, but that's not possible with the knight's pawn. Let's look at the bad example where the black king is situated not far away or too far away from the center. So here the king runs wouldn't do any sense anymore. You cannot get checked again. But here we are able to defend the pawn once. And now, for instance, trying to sneak the... Well, first of all, trying to trade the rooks to be able to cross the d file fails straight up to the just ending up in a lost pawn endgame where we get the opposition and then don't do this. Well, win like this. So, well, too bad for black that let's say king goes here, trying to get here. White is able to play king c4. And now if you attack the rook, well, we can't push the pawn because black's able to take it and then take our rook if we take back. But just rook d5, king e6. Now we are able to push the pawn. And if you check, we can block. And again, the trades end up in a lost pawn endgame. We make progress under the rook. Let's say here, king b6. If you check, we go here. Next, we're gonna probably run the rook away and then, well, be able to push the pawn. Well, something like this is very likely to happen. You end up in some kind of version of Lucena here again. Let's be able to push the pawn here and then we do the Chekerunski. Let's look at some other pawns than the knight pawns. So here, central pawn. Here you have to realize that, well, there's some differences that here the king is on the short side. So the rook has scope to check from the side. So here the situation with the black king gives white an easy win. You can do the run instantly. Now here we don't have to go back and defend the pawn because we have the checkmate threat, so you cannot capture the pawn. So here you would have to keep checking, but then we go here and now we're able to get our pawn rolling forward. If the king would be here, it's basically the same like if you would move the king somewhere. Do the king run, but we do the checkmate threat from the little different square. Can't take the pawn and then we attack the, well, here is the worst thing since we attack the rook and threat the mate at the same time. But here, if the king was on h5, here there is no good mate threats here, but we can do some kind of a waiting move here. And now the problem for black is that he cannot really wait with the rook, because then you get too close to the king again. Well, here you check, but you get attacked and then white's able to push the pawn and win easily. And here if you go here, then again you end up in a square where we can threaten mate and pushing the pawn forward. And again, this happens. We get the pawn rolling. And if you go here, again, we can go here and now rook g1. And here you get the funny e5 ability to push the pawn. And if you take it, you get hit and threaten the mate. There is that funny situation where if black tries to wait with the rook here, the winning method is again a little tricky. We can push the pawn. And the point is that black wants to cut the king off the pawn. But you can play e6 here because of the funny tactics. Now this is threatened, so black has to do something about the pawn. Well, this is the point. Seems like we can't defend the pawn, but we can. Because again, we have the rook, king f5 here, threatening mate and the rook. So this is probably the best practical try from black. So maybe white doesn't, well, it's not that hard to see, but it's a good thing to know. All right. Let's look at the central pawns in a flipped where the king is not really cut on the edge, so there's no mate threat here. Here white can do the king run. We first make the maximum profit with the king, and then we are able to play rook here. And now We're tending to go here and do the tango. Let's say black advances with the king. Can push the pawn, and here again you get kicked away, and then we push the pawn, and I'll probably end up in a Lucena position. Well, that's why Lucena is important, because you end up there a lot. Well, I guess there's the same thing, that you're very likely to end up there anyways. Well, first we push our pawn far as we can. Let's say black waits, and again we're in the Lucena here. With the bishop's pawn, it's basically the same. You can do the king run immediately, because here the king is always on the long side, so the distance checking thing doesn't work. Oh, here we have to defend the pawn, and then we end up basically in the same situation. We push the pawn, and or actually we attack the rook. Probably is the better to activate the king, and then we can check the king off and again end up in a Lucena, most likely. Here with the king on the short side and the rook on the long side with the central pawns, the king run maneuver, or this rook maneuver does not work, because now black can advance, and even though you here attack the rook, oh, we can still go here, but this rook under the pawn method does not work because of the long distance here. And now you push the pawn, you're gonna get checked from this side, and don't have any hidey holes on this side ever. Gonna get checked. And well, for the point is that eventually you have to kind of get too far, and then the king sneaks under the pawn and draws. For instance here, a good time to run under the pawn, and then it's end up in a Philidor. I mean, it's also very likely that you just lose the pawn straight up. Well, maybe not. Oh, yeah, here instead, sorry. Now you go here, you might even lose the game. Bing. But yeah, with the central pawns, the rook under the pawn method does not work. You have to, with the king on the short side, you have to use the method where we get the pawn forward with the mate threats always. Anyways. On the other hand, if in the beginning, if the king is only cut off for it with the one row, then the bishop's pawns are not gonna work out. Well, the king is too close. Gonna get checked. We attack the rook pawn. Go here. You're gonna get checked. Now you try to make the maximum profit. But here the rook method does not work anymore, because the king can sneak closer. And let's say you go here, you're gonna get checked a lot. Let's say rook can go, well, probably can keep checking and then run away, and then we are ready to go under the pawn or whatever. But yeah, the king has to be cut off by 2 rows. The one row thingy does not work. It's a draw. Alright, that was a packet of frontal defenses, where and when they do or don't work, or how to win them. Until next time, ciao ciao.